And what we found was that cows that had more mammary activity during the far-off period had worse colostrum production. So these are those cows, I think we've all seen it, I'm sure you've seen it, and people listening have seen it. We see cows in the dry pen that are like 3 weeks dry, and they have huge udders and they're leaking milk still. And I think these are those cows that have a lot of difficulty drying off, and they're not able to get into that rest and regeneration state, which coincides with colostrogenesis.
Welcome to the Dairy Health Blackbelt Podcast, brought to you by Genetics. I'm Dr. Luciano Cacheta, and I'm presenting to you this podcast that's dedicated to bring you the latest insights and discussions in the dairy science. Get ready to expand your knowledge and stay ahead of today's episode. Today, I'm hosting Dr. Amanda Fischer-Tlustos, who is a visiting scholar at Guelph and has been doing a lot of work in colostrum. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Fischer-Tlustos.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here and talk about some of my PhD work that I haven't gotten out there a lot yet, so it should be fun.
And your PhD is in a very interesting and a very timely topic, which is colostrum. And you have different perspectives. You have like the nutrition aspect of it, and you also have the how is it made. So I think let's go with this, like how is colostrum produced? Like we always talk about harvesting colostrum to feed the calf, but like how are the cows producing it?
Sure. So yeah, that's a big thing that I wanted to focus on. And even I wanted to focus on it more than just IgG, because I saw you guys had Dr. Sabina Mann on recently, and she kind of alluded to this, although she mostly was talking about colostrum management from a passive transfer standpoint. She did allude to the idea that there's all these other things in colostrum aside from IgG. So that's kind of what my PhD focused on, was not just when is IgG transferred from the serum into the colostrum prior to calving, but also when are the macronutrients starting to be synthesized and when are bioactive compounds starting to be synthesized or transferred. And just before I get into that too, to me, the definition of a bioactive compound is something that is present in low concentrations compared to IgG or fat, let's say, which are present at fairly high concentrations in colostrum. But even though they're present at low concentrations, they can still have a really big impact on calf development and physiology. So these are very important to the calf. It's almost like the cow has tailored her colostrum to the calf's needs, what's needed, aside from just IgG and an energy standpoint of those macronutrients. So throughout my PhD work, this is kind of the second half of my PhD work, I wanted to focus on when are all those things being synthesized and what are the cow level factors or mammary level factors controlling the synthesis of those different compounds. So what I did is I had 20 Holstein cows prior to calving. They were all dried off about 2 months prior to calving. And then I was taking prepartum secretions, which was really just small volumes of strippings from dry cows. We didn't want to take too much because then we could induce them into lactation, which would wreck our colostrum, which is not what we wanted to do. So we took these prepartum strippings at really frequent time points prior to calving. And as we got close to calving, we started taking them every other day. So we could really see when are these things turning on and when are things being transferred. So we found, first I'll just start with the macronutrients. We found that lactose and fat really only start to turn on within about 1 to 2 days prior to calving. And that makes sense to me. They kind of turn on with lactogenesis, which is milk production. And then we found that protein starts to turn on about a week prior to calving. So again, I think this is kind of related to lactogenesis. But when we looked at IgG, what we actually found was that it started to accumulate substantially in some cows, even as early as 6 weeks prior to calving. And some cows were accumulating it even before that.
Like by the time they're being dried off, basically, almost.
Yeah, so they were dried off around like 8 weeks prior to calving, and they were already accumulating it 2 weeks after. So that's pretty impressive and kind of really started to reframe my thinking, because I think a lot of research, including myself, I'm guilty of it, we try to put in nutritional strategies or management strategies in the close-up period to try to drive more IgG transfer. But it kind of made me think maybe this isn't the time we need to be looking at that. And when we did our correlation analyses between the cow level factors and mammary level factors that were associated with IgG that ended up in first milking colostrum, the earlier it could accumulate in the prepartum secretion, the better the colostrum would be after she calved. And we found that the more gradual or slowly that accumulation could happen, the better for first milking colostrum.
Genetics turns podcast airtime into brand authority. We don't sell ads, we elevate voices. Curious how far your voice can go to become a reference in the industry and attract more leads? Scan the QR code and discover how we can turn your expertise into unmatched brand authority. Let's transform expertise into influence, starting now.
So like as if they start accumulating longer, right? Like based on your
more time.
That leads to a better colostrum quality.
Yeah, the more time they can spend in that colostrum making state seemed to be better for colostrum, which it's not a huge surprise, but when I started to look at the associations between IgG transfer in the immediate weeks before calving, so like 3 weeks, 2 weeks, there was really no association. So it really seems what happens before the close-up period is actually really important, and how quickly those cows can get into that IgG transferring state is what really matters.
That's interesting. And you said you said you have like 20 cows or something. So, but
Yeah.
did you look into like, is there any factors there associated with like the differences in the cows, like cows that start accumulating accumulating earlier or more gradual versus, I don't know, spiking or whatever it is?
Totally. Yeah. So what I did decide to look at was I had like previous lactation data. So milk yield in the previous lactation, milk yield at dry off. And then we also, as I mentioned before, we were looking at mammary level measures. So we also were doing mammary uptakes of energy precursors like glucose and acetate. And I also was doing mammary blood flow with an ultrasound. So these were kind of indicators of mammary activity during the dry period. And what we found was that cows that had more mammary activity during the far off period had worse colostrum production. So these are those cows, I think we've all seen it, I'm sure you've seen it, and people listening have seen it. We see cows in the dry pen that are like 3 weeks dry, and they have huge udders and they're leaking milk still. And I think these are those cows that have a lot of difficulty drying off, and they're not able to get into that rest and regeneration state, which coincides with colostrogenesis. And we also found too that the more milk the cow made at dry off, she had more mammary activity in the far off period and then worse colostrum. So this is even more exacerbated for our high producing cows, which are typically our ones that have trouble drying off.
Yeah, it's a lot of the population now, right? Because we're being good about managing those cows and
genetics. So I think we've selected cows now to make so much milk, but we kind of have to change what we're doing at the dry off level, because I read a study, I'm not sure of the most recent update, but I read a review paper from 2020 that said 75% of US farms are practicing abrupt dry off. So just
Correct.
Dry off in one day, which is, from my standpoint, concerning from colostrum production, but that's also really concerning for milk production. Because I was trying to think of an analogy, and the Olympics were just on. So I was like, you have to think there's like a pro athlete. They need to rest. They can't just go right into the next Olympics 2 months later. They need a rest and regeneration period. And I think that can be what's missing, but it's a management thing that we really need to drive more.
Yeah, this is super interesting. And like, this is the issue, quote unquote, of this type of podcast, because it's never long enough. Because like, I think we're just getting to the meat of it, and we're gonna have to cut it short because of the time for the people listening. But this is very interesting, and you brought a lot of good information to our audience. I'm glad that you had time to come and speak to us. And I hope we can get you more in the future to continue to learn more about colostrum production.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
And you also mentioned that like people that would like to know more about colostrum, like I think there's an event coming up that you'd like to invite people to join.
Yes. So if you guys like this topic of colostrum synthesis and even just colostrum bioactivity in general, I am hosting a conference with Dr. Michael Steele at the University of Guelph. It will be from May 20th to 22nd, and it is called the International Scientific Meeting on Colostrum. And following the scientific meeting on May 23rd, we're also going to have a calf management centered producer day. So if anyone listening finds this topic super interesting, You can go to colostrummeeting.com to look at the full program and hopefully also to register.
That would be great because, like I said, this was definitely not enough time, and you have a couple of days to talk all about colostrum. That would be awesome.
Yes, my favorite topic.
This concludes another episode of the Dairy Health Blackbelt Podcast presented to you by WiseNetics. Thank you for joining us today. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to stay updated on future episodes. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review. Your feedback is very valuable to us. Until next time, this is Dr. Luciano Cacheta, and this is the Dairy Health Blackbelt Podcast. Thank you. Bye.